Hi guys and welcome back. Doing well in your exam requires that you have all the relevant information you need to answer the questions in the topic being examined. In this video, we'll be covering all the content you need to know for topic 5, the UK's evolving human landscapes. If you have any questions or anything else you'd like me to tackle, please let me know in the comment section and I will respond accordingly. I'll also be making videos for the remainder of the topics before the exam. So make sure you subscribe so that you are notified when I post them. Okay, so we'll start off with a map that shows the population density of the UK. And we are specifically going to be looking at urban cores. Now this here is a choropleth map that shows that population density of the UK. And it's using different shades of green to show population density here in the UK. Population density refers to the number of people living in a specific area. Now that area can be defined in terms of kilometers squared or square kilometers, or sometimes even in miles squared. Now areas can have a high density of population or a low density of population. And the places with high density of population are referred to as densely populated, and the ones that have a low population density are sparsely populated. Now, this map here uses the darker shades of green to show the most densely populated areas, and those are areas, as you can see from the key here, that have over 1,000 people living per square kilometer, all the way to the lightest shade of green, where you have less than 50 people per square kilometer. As you can see on the map, the population of the UK is unevenly distributed. That means that it's not equally distributed across the country. The highest population density is concentrated in the major cities, so such as London in the southeast, Birmingham, Liverpool, Manchester, Newcastle, and Glasgow. These areas tend to be the centers for economic activity, so they tend to have the highest number of jobs. They therefore attract a lot of people to come and work in them, and that is what creates a high population density. They are the drivers of the economy because they generate the greatest proportion of the country's GDP. And we know that GDP is a measure of wealth in a country. It's the total value of goods and services that are sold in that country every single year. So such areas are called core regions. And the best example is London, which generates 22 to 25% of the UK's GDP. That's almost a quarter of all the money that is earned in the UK every single year. As these large cities grow, they tend to merge with surrounding towns to form what are called conurbations. The cities of Liverpool, Manchester, Leeds, Bradford, and Sheffield are referred to as the northern powerhouse for the northern region of the UK. Okay, so we'll be looking at an example of a rural periphery area here in the UK. And the one that our specification has recommended is Allerdale. And Allerdale is in northwest England, in this area over here. Living in the rural periphery has its benefits as well as its limitations. And there are some benefits of living in Allerdale. Now, the first one is cheaper homes due to the distance from the urban core. Now, because there is less economic activity in Allerdale, the cost of homes is going to be lower because there is less demand for them. Then there is also less traffic, congestion, and air pollution. And Allerdale is a lot quieter and more scenic than the urban cores. There's also a perceived better quality of life, and it's due to the above factors that in 2015, Allerdale was said to have the happiest residents in the UK. Now, the limitations of living in Allerdale. One of those is an aging population. Now, an aging population in Allerdale is as a result of retirement migration. So when people move out of urban cores to go and live in the rural periphery, like Allerdale, due to the benefits that we have just mentioned. And then it's also due, that aging population is also due to out-migration of the younger people. Now, because there's less economic activity, the younger people are likely to move out to the cities to find, better opportunities there. And this can actually lead to a brain drain in these areas. Another limitation that we'll discuss here is low incomes. The jobs in these areas tend to be in the primary sector of industry. And obviously those jobs will pay a lot less. So if you're working in farming or fishing, then you're likely to be paid a lot less than somebody who is working in another sector, especially in the tertiary sector. The jobs are also in tourism, and tourism also tends to be seasonal in such areas and does not pay as much. The next limitation we'll look at is poor public transport, and that is due to how remote these areas are. And this can lead to high transportation costs or high transport costs, such that if you want to move around these particular areas, the cost of doing that is likely to be quite high. Then there's poor investment from businesses and from TNCs, and this is mainly because of that remoteness and the fact that there aren't as many people, there's not as much economic activity, and therefore businesses and TNCs investing here would not be able to make as much money as they would like to. Now, the reason why we are comparing and contrasting urban cores to the rural periphery is that there tends to be significant economic disparity between urban cores and the rural periphery. And due to this, the UK government and the EU use 4 strategies to try and redress this imbalance. So what are the 4 strategies that the UK government and the EU have used to try and address the imbalance between core regions and periphery regions? The first one is enterprise zones. Now, these zones here help companies with startup costs and give those companies tax cuts, and they also give them access to technological infrastructure. And all this is meant to incentivize them to locate in certain areas, especially in the rural periphery. However, these enterprise zones here have been criticized because only 15 out of the 48 enterprise zones currently in the UK are in rural areas, meaning that the core regions are still the ones that are benefiting more, and therefore that imbalance is not really being addressed. The second strategy is transport infrastructure, and this involves improving the road and rail transport. Now, if you do that in the rural periphery, then you're going to improve or provide access to those remote locations. And that would in turn attract companies and businesses to locate in these areas, and therefore, generate jobs and lead to economic growth. However, most of the investment in transport is still around the urban cores, and the periphery is continuing to lag behind. The next strategy is regional grants. Now, grants obviously is money that is given, and in this case, it's money and advice that is given to businesses. And these are a lot more widespread in the UK and will target rural areas. But the limitation with this is that the businesses only get less than 20% of the required startup costs. Now, if they have to cover the 80% and they don't necessarily have it, then they will still struggle. Okay, on to the 4th strategy, and that is EU grants. The European Union gives these to the poorest regions in the UK. But the limitation here again, like we know, is that the UK is no longer benefiting due to Brexit. It's no longer part of the EU. Now, I'd like you to take a moment to think about whether you think these strategies have been successful overall or not. And that would be a useful thing to think about, because it's one of the things that you may be asked in an examination question. In this next slide, we are going to be looking at UK's evolving demographic landscape. So when we talk about demographics, we are referring to people. So it's referring to the population. Now I have summarized this changing landscape of the demographics of the UK into three different categories. And the first one is reasons for population increase. So the population of the UK is obviously increasing. And there are several reasons for that. And there are two main reasons for that. And the first one is migration. Now, higher levels of migration than emigration have led to a higher net immigration. Now, what does that mean? So it means that, well, immigration means the number of people that are moving into the country. So those are obviously international migrants. And then we also have emigration, which is when people move out of the country. So, for example, if somebody decided to buy a property in Spain and move to Spain because it's, it has good weather and all that, and it's coastal. There's a lot of coast around Spain and so on. Then they would be considered to have emigrated from the UK. And what we are saying here is that the net migration, which is the difference between the immigration and the emigration, is high here in the UK, and that's because the number of people coming in is higher than the people leaving the UK. Now, higher immigration has been linked to the initial expansion of the EU in 2014. So that was when the EU welcomed new members, and as a result, those members had access to different countries in the EU, and one of the countries or destinations that those new entrants felt that they wanted to go to is the UK. So a lot of them actually came to London in search for work. And then the second reason for why the UK has had quite a bit of immigration is because there is a need for skilled and specialized workers, especially in the knowledge economy. So the UK government views economic migration as a positive because it mitigates against an aging population. Now, what does that mean? So that means that this economic migration of these specialized or skilled workers is a good thing, because these kinds of people will come in and they will work and they will earn and pay taxes, and those taxes are the ones that are going to be paid as pensions to the people that are in the older age category. So the people that are retired, their pensions normally come from the taxes that people have paid. So the second reason for why the population of the UK is increasing is natural increase. Now, a large proportion of people that are migrating into the UK are economically active. So they are the people who actually move to the UK to work. And these are the people that are considered to have high fertility rates. So high fertility rates or fertility rates refers to the number of children per woman. And they have high fertility rates because obviously they're in that younger category and are likely to have a family, and that then leads to higher birth rates and then to a natural increase within the population. Okay, moving on to the next category here, and that category is the impacts of immigration. So the impacts of people coming into the UK. So people coming into the UK has caused ethnic diversity within the country, and especially in the urban cores like London. In London, we have 41% of the population being foreign-born as of 2025. So these are recent figures that I looked up, and that is quite a significant number of people that were not born in this country. Then the second impact of migration is economic and cultural change. So economics to do with money, and then culture to do with people and their way of life. So new services like shops, restaurants, places of worship, and music and so on, now in the UK cater to different cultures or a variety of cultures. And the businesses also generate an income. Those foreign businesses or those businesses that sell products from abroad also generate an income and add to the GDP of the country. And again, they mitigate that issue of an aging population within the country. Okay, moving on to the third category here, and that is population density, distribution, and flows. So where you have the most number of people, that's population density. It's the distribution, how they are spread out across the country, and flows, where they move in and out of within the country. Okay, so what's the explanation then? Increasing population density in and around the urban cores, especially the southeast. So this is why we have 41% of London being foreign born, and that's because most of the migrants will migrate to where the jobs are, and that will be the urban cores. You will rarely find them in the rural periphery because there are no jobs, and they are actually migrating to the UK to get those jobs. Then we also have rise of commuter towns and villages. Now these here are considered to be the accessible rural areas. These are areas that are outside the urban cores, but where people choose to move to rather. So because the population of the urban cores is increasing, the wealthier demographic, or some of the people that have got better incomes and more wealth, are likely to move out of the urban areas due to push factors such as congestion, air pollution, and so on, and they move to these accessible rural areas that are not likely to be too far away from that urban core. And if they are still working in the urban core, they'll be able to easily commute to their places of work, because these smaller towns, these commuter towns and villages, are quite accessible. They will have good rail and road links. And the work from home culture is actually contributing to this, or encouraging this, because a lot of people will work 2 to 3 days from home, and maybe go to work 2 or 3 days in a week. Then we have retirement migration. Now this is another flow, as well as counter-urbanization. So this is as a result of the house prices and the cost of living being fairly high in urban cores like London. And people then, some people then prefer to move out to the countryside and leave the urban areas entirely, especially the people who are retiring. As we mentioned before, Aladale, for example, is a place that is getting retirees going to live there, and so that is a flow of population. So the flows here of population are retirement migration and counter-urbanization. So the next thing that we are going to be discussing is the decline of the old economy, and we will start off by looking at the Clark-Fisher model. Now this model here shows us how the sectors of employment change as a country develops. So the country will develop through 3 main stages, and the 3 stages are the pre-industrial stage, which you can see right here. Then you've got the industrial stage, and then the post-industrial stage. During the pre-industrial stage, the sector of industry that most people will be working in is the primary sector. As you can see, in the pre-industrial stage, over 70% of people work in the primary sector. And the number of people working in the secondary sector is only around 20%. And then in the tertiary sector is around 10%. Then as that particular country continues to develop, we get to the industrial stage. And this is a stage when the manufacturing industry begins to take off. Now, during that time, the manufacturing industry will be the highest, will employ the most people in that particular country, and the primary sector of industry will be declining. As you can see here, it's going down, and the tertiary sector of industry will also be increasing. Then coming on to the post-industrial stage, and this is where most of the UK, this is where the UK actually is at the moment. We have a high tertiary industry, a lot of people working in the tertiary sector, so working in services. And then the secondary sector, as you can see here, is actually declining. Now that can be explained by processes such as global shift and deindustrialization here in the UK, which we shall talk about later on. And the primary sector continues to decline and now is very, very low. The number of people that are working in the primary sector is very, very low here. Then we have a rise of a fourth sector of industry here, which is the quaternary sector of industry. The quaternary sector of industry is based on, people, having expertise or specialized knowledge to do certain jobs. And that is a sector that begins to grow during the post-industrial stage. Okay, so why did we have a look at that? That was to explain the old economy, because the UK is actually no exception in terms of following this Clark-Fisher model, because the UK once was pre-industrial and then developed through the Industrial Revolution in the industrial stage, and then is finally in the post-industrial stage. Now, so where are we going to start here then? So the economy of the UK has evolved in a similar way. I've already mentioned that. And the UK was once dominated obviously by the primary industry, and most people were employed in farming, fishing, and mining. Whatever was grown was produced in these three sectors, or whatever was produced in these three sectors rather, needed to be processed or manufactured. So it had to be taken to the factories to be processed so that it's made ready for sale. And that is what led to the Industrial Revolution of the 1700s and 1800s. And the UK saw a growth in manufacturing and greatly prospered from that. Now, areas like Dinnington in the north of England thrived due to having coal reserves that could be mined. Now, that coal was actually used in the manufacturing of steel, which was then used for shipbuilding. And therefore, places like Dinnington really prospered and thrived as a result of that manufacturing and secondary sector of industry. Now, that actually is what we are referring to as the old economy. And that was when the UK heavily relied on primary and secondary industry. However, that old economy actually declined. Now, the colliery in Dinnington is our case study for our specification. The colliery there, which is the place where they mined, the coal mine where the coal was being mined, closed in 1992. And that was mainly due to declining coal reserves and then competition from overseas as well. Now, when that coal mine, colliery closed, it led to a domino effect, which led to closure of other related industries such as the steel production and shipbuilding. Now, we know that steel production and shipbuilding relied on the coal that was being mined in this area, and therefore if the coal is no longer being mined, then it means that the production of steel and the shipbuilding will also come to a stop. This caused a spiral of decline in Dinnington and other similar areas, and those areas are mostly located in the north of the UK. And the closure of these sectors of employment meant loss of jobs, poverty, and out-migration from those areas. There were also obviously abandoned buildings that were run down because people left those areas to try and find employment somewhere else. So between 1980 and 2015, primary industry in the UK was down 45%, which is almost half. Secondary was down 43%, almost half again. But the tertiary industry and quaternary sectors were up 59%. So there was clearly a changing of the guard as the old economy declined. So for your examination, just make sure you know what the old economy was. It was the economy that relied on the primary and secondary sector, and that declined in places that were mostly in the north of the UK, like Dinnington, where coal was being mined, and then the industries, the sectors that replaced that old economy were the tertiary and quaternary sectors. So the new economy that has risen after the decline of the old one can be categorized into two different categories here. And I have summarized one under low salary new economy, and then the second one, high salary new economy. Now the example for a low salary new economy is Dinnington, which is in the north of the UK, like we had mentioned earlier. Now the people that lost their jobs in the northern mining towns of the UK, such as Dinnington, needed to find employment elsewhere. However, most of them had only ever worked in the mines, in the coal mines, and therefore they were unskilled for the job market that they had come out into. So they either needed to retrain or work for low-paid unskilled jobs such as care workers, delivery drivers, working in retail and shopping centers, and so on. So a lot of jobs in those areas were also part-time, and some were located in the bigger towns surrounding those areas, such as Sheffield and Doncaster. Now that meant that people had to commute to work, which was an added expense, which actually becomes quite a problem because as it is, they are not being paid that much. So a lot of these places, as a result of all this, experienced deprivation, leading to increasing disparity between them and other areas such as London, Canary Wharf, where there is a high salary new economy. Okay, so moving on to that high salary new economy, the example being Canary Wharf. The UK government decided to encourage the growth of the tertiary and quaternary sectors of industry after the decline of this old economy. So both of these here, as in tertiary and quaternary, are in the service sector. But the knowledge economy requires a lot more specialized knowledge and skill. So this is acquired through a university education, and graduates with a law or accountancy degree will therefore work in firms like JP Morgan in Canary Wharf and will earn over £100,000 a year. So these two sectors of the economy will also offer other benefits, such as the ability to work from home, so you can save on transportation or commuting costs if you like, and this provides advantages such as flexible working hours, less stress and expenditure from commuting. It will alleviate the child care costs, because if you're working from home, then it means that you can care for your children at the same time. It also provides better health and generally a better quality of life. However, it may be difficult for companies to manage and motivate people that are working from home. For the employees, they may feel that they're always at work because home is where they work from. So that can be a bit stressful as well. So the work from home culture and the fact that there is no need to transport raw materials and manufactured goods in and out has also led to companies that are footloose. So footloose companies or organizations are those that are not tied to location. So they can locate anywhere. Just the way some people can work remotely, these companies can locate anywhere and still be able to thrive. So what are we saying then? We are saying that the new economy rose after the old economy declined. However, there were disparities in this new economy because in some parts of the country, that new economy comprised of very low salary jobs, and then in other parts of the new economy, there were a lot better paid jobs, and where people in those particular areas, such as Canary Wharf, have a much better quality of life. Okay, so we are now going to look at London's site and situation. So site refers to the land on which a settlement is built, and the early settlers tried to find land that was suitable for their settlement. Now, they took several factors into consideration. So those include the relief of the land, so the topography, the availability of water, so a river being nearby was a good thing, and then how good that particular site was defensively, so that they could defend themselves from enemies or attackers. So what made London such a good site then for the Romans? So the first reason was that the land where London was built is quite flat. So it's very easy to build on. So it's located on a flat floodplain, and this is why it's flat. It's towards the end of the River Thames. And then there was also a bridging point. Now, this is an area where the water is shallow enough for you to, to be able to cross the river and access the north from the south and the south from the north. That obviously made it a good site as well. And then the River Thames also is a source of water, so for their domestic purposes, for industry, and also actually the River Thames was used for navigation. So goods could be transported up and down the river. So that was good for trading purposes. And this is what made London such a good place to set up a settlement. So the settlement was built in Londinium in 200 AD near the bridging point, and then began to expand outwards from there. So what about London's situation? Now, situation is slightly different to site. So we said that site is the land on which a settlement is built. Now, situation refers to the location of a settlement in relation to other physical and human features around it. Okay, so, and regionally, London is close to mainland Europe. So that is a situational factor. So it means that it's well located, in relation to mainland Europe. And that facilitates the growth of London through trade, has facilitated the growth of London through trade since the Industrial Revolution. Then internationally, London's time zone is also very good in terms of trading with other countries, especially for the London Stock Exchange. New York is 5 hours behind, Asia is 5 to 7 hours ahead, and the UAE, or the United Arab Emirates, is only 4 hours ahead. So from that perspective, it's very easy for London to trade with all these other areas. So situationally, that is an economic advantage. Then we also have connectivity, and that also helps maintain London's status as a world city. Now, as we saw in the challenges of an urbanizing world topic, a world city is one that has influence economically and politically around the world. And London has 4 airports, which gives it great connectivity. So there's a London, Heathrow Airport, there's a London Gatwick, there's a London Stansted, and the London Luton Airport. So those actually give London connectivity both internationally and locally. Then we also have the Eurostar to Europe, which is, is a very fast way of getting into Europe. And then nationally, we also have very fast rail services and a fantastic radial road network that has its central hub in London. And as you can see actually on the map that is below here, below this site factors map, we have that radial road network being shown here. So this network of roads, in this particular area here seems all to be coming into London. So London is actually the hub, and the reason why all these roads are coming into London is for economic purposes. Well, not just economic purposes, but that provides an opportunity for economic activity to take place, making London a very good place to live. Okay, so we shall now look at London's land use and also the land values here in London. Now we have a model here, and this here is the Burgess model, and it's a geographical model that has been used to explain how land develops in an urban area. Now the reason why I've included it here is because it helps us to understand urban land use here within London. Okay, so Burgess suggested that a settlement grows from a central point, which is the CBD that is shown here in blue, and then grows outwards, and you have outside that CBD you have an industrial zone that has got factories, then you have low class residential after that, then you have medium class residential, and then finally you have high class residential here in the suburbs. So he suggested that a city or a settlement will grow outwards from a central point. So urban, London's land use is similar but not exactly the same. And London's structure includes obviously the CBD, which is central London, and this is the oldest part of the city and the economic hub. It has very tall office buildings, being the center of economic activity, and there is also great accessibility, like we saw on the map before, that all the roads seem to lead to it. And it's not just the roads, there's the overground and underground that goes into London, the networks that all lead to London. So it has great accessibility. Now, the CBD also has very high building density. And that high building density means also that the land values there are quite high. So because of the high demand for the land, then the cost of it is also very high. Now, London CBD has also expanded to include the West End, London's West End, where we have theatres and shopping, and has also expanded into Canary Wharf that we've talked about, which is the center rather of the knowledge economy. Then London also has inner suburbs, which are both affluent, so places like Kensington, and areas that are lower income areas, but which are experiencing change. So such areas include places like Stratford, where there has been regeneration and gentrification. And those areas that are lower income were formerly industrial areas during the Industrial Revolution, but due to the decline of the old economy, they have needed regeneration and gentrification. Now, obviously, some of them have been regenerated, some of them have not been. Okay, and then we have the third one here, which is the rural-urban fringe. So this is the outermost part, and it refers to where the city meets the countryside. And these areas also in London have grown due to London's urban sprawl, and housing costs that have been rising over time. And then, as we mentioned before, the work from home culture has also encouraged the growth of that rural-urban fringe. Now, this next graphic here shows London's land values, and as you can see, the CBD, which is the center of economic activity, has the highest land values. So it is the tallest here, so it means that the land values are highest here. Only the larger, wealthier companies and retail chains can afford to pay the high rental costs in the CBD. There's also a limited amount of land in the CBD. Like we said, there is a high building density, and therefore the development of the CBD is actually upwards other than outwards, and that's why you have skyscrapers. Since there's such a shortage of land, you're better off building upwards other than outwards. Now, the land values will decrease as you move away from the CBD, as you can see here. Okay, so these are lower peaks here as you go further away from the CBD. Although having said that, these are fairly, they are substantially high than other areas which have got lower land values. Okay, so these are areas obviously that are like a secondary CBD around a station or a road link, for example the Shard, so that will have high land values. And then places like Kensington down here is likely also to have higher land values because it's a wealthier area. So yeah, again, this is to show that the land values in London decrease as you go away from the CBD. So what are the causes and impacts of migration to London? So the growth of London is as a result of a number of reasons, and the first one is national migration. Now, this also is referred to as internal migration in our specification sometimes, and is mostly of recent graduates from UK universities moving to London for employment opportunities and a better quality of life. So if they were born in a rural periphery, once they finish their education, they will want to move to this, to London, because that is where the jobs are, and the better quality of life is for somebody who is of their age. Okay, and then the second cause of London's growth is international migration, and this type of migration, as we mentioned earlier, has got two categories and of people who are coming to work in London. One category is skilled workers, and these are the workers who are well educated and have specialized skills. Now, these kinds of workers are likely to work in the knowledge economy or other sectors of the economy where there are shortages. So, for example, the UK in the recent past, so in the last, few years, has been in need of doctors and nurses, and these doctors and nurses have had to be recruited from other countries. So that is an example of skilled workers coming into the UK. We also have a second category of international migration, and that is of unskilled workers. And these workers tend to do the jobs that Londoners might not want to do. So jobs like garbage collection, for example, are jobs that these unskilled workers would do in London. So what are the impacts then of that migration to London? So the new migrants find areas with the lowest, or with lower rents rather, and they tend to cluster in similar areas where there are people like them. Now, this way they can preserve their culture and also be protected from discrimination and have access to services that are available in their home countries. So services such as places of worship, shops and restaurants. And this has modified London's demographic landscape. So this particular map here is an example of that clustering in London. So we've said that they cluster in similar areas, so the migrants cluster in similar areas, and that is what this map here shows. And it shows the percentage of Asian, Indian, British residents in London. And it shows that the distribution is not evenly spread out across London. You can see that the places that have over 37% of people being Asian, Indian, British residents are concentrated here in the western part of London. And then there's also an anomaly here where you have some in Newham, which is in the east of London. Okay, so this clustering has occurred in Harrow, Wembley, Southall, and Hounslow, and that is in the west of London. So the causes of migration to London: national migration, international migration, and under international migration we have migration of skilled workers and unskilled workers. And then the impact of that migration has been clustering of different ethnicities across different parts of London. This particular example here is of Asian, Indian, British residents, but there are also examples in the specification as well for Black British residents as well. Okay, so it's important to remember that as well. So as mentioned earlier, London is a world city. A world city is one that has economic and political influence globally. London generates 22 to 25% of UK's GDP. Now, this is a lot of money that is generated here in London. Almost a quarter of all the money that is generated in the UK is generated in London. Now, having said that, however, it was estimated between 2022 and 2023 that 2.2 million Londoners, 24%, live in poverty. Now this is 3% higher than the rest of the UK, because the rest of the UK is at 21%. Now this implies that London has both the richest and the poorest people in the UK. There is therefore significant inequality in the city, with different standards of living and life expectancy for different Londoners. Some parts of London have high levels of deprivation, while others do not. So deprivation refers to a lack of wealth and services. The government uses 7 indicators to produce an index of multiple deprivation. So it's the IMD that you used during your fieldwork studies if you studied an urban area, an urban environment. And the indicators that are used to measure deprivation are income, education, employment, health, disability, access to housing, crime, and living environment. So what we are going to do here is compare and contrast 2 areas, one that is deprived and one that is not in London. And the 2 areas are Newham and Richmond upon Thames. So Newham is actually one of the most deprived areas, while Richmond is one of the richest. Now we can see their locations here. So if we are looking for Richmond upon Thames, we have it right here. Okay, so southwest London, Richmond upon Thames, and then Newham is right here in East London. And as you can see here, this here is the IMD, and if the color is red, it's obviously quite deprived. But if the color is, ranging towards or tending towards the light green, then it's less deprived. And obviously, as you can see from the map, Richmond upon Thames is less deprived, and Newham here is quite deprived. Okay, so I have made a summary here of the indicators just for comparison purposes. And the first one that we'll start off with is household income. And as you can see here, for Richmond, the household income is £90,400 a year on average. And for Newham, it's 24,000, which is substantially lower. Then in terms of crime rates in Newham are 112.64 per 1,000. And then in Richmond, they are 56.4 per 1,000. Again, that is almost half, okay, in terms of crime. Then life expectancy for females in Newham is 56.8. In Richmond, it's 72.1. That's quite significant, okay? And then for males in Newham, life expectancy is 57.9, and in Richmond, it's 70.3. And then in terms of unemployment in 2023, these are figures that I got for 2023, in Newham, unemployment is at 7.9%, and Richmond is at 4.5%. And these here actually, as you can see, are explaining why there are such disparities between the 2 areas here. Okay, and then we also have data for students that are eligible to free school meals, and we can see that in Newham that number is quite high at 39%, and the number in Richmond is only 13.5%. Okay, and then the last one here, indicator that I have put here, is owner-occupied living. Where people own the home that they actually live in. And in Newham, that figure is at 30.8%, and Richmond is at 48.2%. So you can see that these indicators actually show us, or give us rather, an indication as to the levels of deprivation in an area. And these here are 2 contrasting areas of London, and that actually again shows that London does have income disparity or disparity in the quality of life of people living within the city. Okay, so in this next slide, I have summarized the reasons for London's past cycle of decline, and I've done it in a flowchart format. So we are going to start off with containerization, and containerization started in 1956. Now, with the coming in, or with the arrival of containers, it meant that the container ships were a lot bigger, and as a result of this, they could not navigate the shallow waters at the London docks. That meant that these London docks eventually shut down, or they closed in 1981. Now, following the closure of those docks, deindustrialization took place. And this is because the industries that relied on these docks could no longer get goods brought in through the River Thames or the London docks, nor moved out from the, after the manufacturing process. They could not be then sent out to market because the docks had closed. And once they shut down and the industrialization occurred, unemployment became rampant in the area. And in 2001, only 7% of people worked in manufacturing compared to 30% in 1971. So the next thing that followed the deindustrialization was suburbanization. Now, due to the dereliction that took place in these inner parts of London, there were push factors that were, forcing people to move out of the area. So things like, congestion, traffic, things like dereliction, so abandoned buildings, and crime. All these were factors that made the wealthier demographic want to leave the inner city and to move to the suburbs. And this is a process we are calling suburbanization. So inner London, as a result, was depopulated with 1.5 million people moving to the suburbs. And this was actually facilitated by the electrification of the underground. And people could now live outside London in the suburbs, not outside London, but in the suburbs, and still be able to commute to work. And this obviously depopulated London. Then the next thing we are looking at here is decentralization. And this is when shops, offices, and people and industry move from urban areas to the suburbs or to the periphery. This was catalyzed by out-of-town shopping centers, retail parks, business parks, and e-commerce. So all these were contributing factors to the decentralization of the inner parts of London. However, this particular cycle of decline, was reversed to some extent because as there was some resurgence as London fought back against the loss of business. And they did this by building shopping centers in London to attract people back to spend money in London. And the examples that we have here are Westfield Shopping Centre in Stratford, and the other one is Shepherd's Bush in is a second shopping centre in Shepherd's Bush in West London. So this was all in an attempt to bring expenditure back to London, and as a result create employment and bring people, back into London. Okay, so this next slide is a summary of London's sprawl and regeneration. So despite losing 1.5 million people between 1951 and 1981, London has actually continued to grow in size. And these are some of the reasons. So sprawl here actually just means that London has continued to spread outwards, okay? And one of the reasons is counter-urbanization. And we know that people, when counter-urbanization happens, people move out of the city. And in London's case, they moved out of the city to live in the home counties, making London a conurbation. So a conurbation obviously is when a large city like London joins up with other smaller settlements that surround it. And this actually blurs the boundary of where the city and the countryside is. Okay, and then the second reason while London has continued to grow in size, is suburbanization, which we mentioned in the previous slide. And this is as people move to the suburbs to live in bigger houses with a garden and that occupies a lot more space. So with suburbanization, it has also meant that bigger homes have had to be built, and we know that those bigger homes are going to occupy a lot more space than the smaller ones. And then reason number 3 here is the baby boom that took place after World War II. So fertility rates were 2.8 in 1948. And when these people started their families in the 1960s rather, they needed a lot more room. And as a result of that, there was need for more housing, and that obviously as well caused London to continue to grow. Then lastly, we have increasing divorce and later marriage. And this means that there's need for more homes because when there's a divorce, obviously there will be 2 people, and those 2 people will need 2 separate homes. And then later marriage also means that people are living alone for a lot longer. So that again is generating a need for more homes, meaning a lot more building, and then meaning that London is just going to continue to grow and to sprawl. Okay, then in terms of urban resurgence, apart from London's occupied land area increasing, the city has also regrown from within. And this is due to these processes that are mentioned down here. And one of them is regeneration. And this obviously has happened owing to the availability of brownfield sites. So places obviously in the inner city that were former industrial areas that were, that declined are referred to as brownfield sites, because the land that is run down, or the buildings that are run down in those areas the land that they occupy can be rebuilt or regenerated. Okay, and when they have been regenerated, this has led to better environmental quality, rebranding, and better economic opportunities, and that has led to the multiplier effect. And therefore, those particular areas that have been regenerated are also growing. So London is resurging or is regrowing. Then secondly, we have T&C investment as well. And this investment is mostly due to the knowledge economy. So examples here that I put here for us are, JP Morgan and Credit Suisse, who are in Canary Wharf. Now, when such big companies come and locate in London, it means that London will begin to grow, because, as we mentioned before, Canary Wharf is an area where people are paid a lot of money, and because they want to be able to experience, the life in London, they're also likely to live in some of these regenerated parts of London and spend their money there. So that causes London to continue to grow as these, large TNCs invest within London. Then we have the third point here, or reason for urban resurgence, and that is gentrification. So gentrification is where you improve the urban area, an inner city in this case, for the purposes of attracting a wealthier demographic into the area. And an example of this happening is East Village in Stratford. Then lastly, we have studentification. So studentification is where you have, studentification rather in London has increased due to demand from overseas students, right? So studentification basically means you have more students that are living in an urban area, and that obviously does tend to stimulate growth as well, because the students have money and they spend the money within the local area. And the UK universities have seen an increase in the number of overseas students, and this obviously has led to studentification within London. And examples here are the University of East London, which also has a campus in Stratford. So this slide here summarizes the strategies that have been used to make London more sustainable. And there are 4 strategies that we are going to be looking at. The first one being improvements in transport. So this includes London Congestion Charge, ULEZ, hybrid buses, and the provision of more electric charging points. These all aim at improving London's air quality by reducing the greenhouse gas emissions. Now, the London congestion charge, for example, will reduce the number of cars that will be going to London, because by having a charge, people are going to be dissuaded from using their cars to go into London and are more likely to use, either buses or trains to get into London. And then with the ULEZ, it's the ultra low emission zone, which is a zone in London where if you have a high emitting, high pollution emitting vehicle, you have to pay a charge to enter into that particular zone, which again will dissuade people with, from driving into London. So with more electric charging points as well, that obviously is helping people that, it's encouraging people to buy and drive electric cars. And all this obviously is aimed at improving London's air quality. Then the next strategy is the work from home culture. And this helps to reduce the cost of travel to work and improves the quality of life of commuters. And of course, it has also reduced the greenhouse gas emissions and congestion because people are working from home a couple of days a week. And then the next one is affordable housing. Now, we know that the cost of housing in London is quite high, and as a result, to make London a more sustainable place to live, affordable housing schemes have been provided. And one such scheme is Fast Steps. And this particular scheme helps low-income earners to buy property through shared ownership. However, this can still be quite expensive and out of reach for a lot of people. Then lastly, we have energy efficient housing. Now, the government has actually provided free or subsidized schemes like wall cavity insulation, which is where you insulate housing so that it's a lot more efficient. The heat, it retains heat during the winter, and therefore you reduce your costs on heating, and that also has a lower carbon footprint, and also installation of solar panels and in London homes. So that is quite was a good scheme because it has helped a lot of Londoners have those solar panels and wall cavity insulation. So other schemes as well, like BedSed. This one is an important one and a good one to remember. So this is the Beddington Zero Energy Development, and it's in Sutton. It's a sustainable community that provides or promotes energy conservation. And the homes here use 81% less energy for heating, 45% less electricity, and 58% less water than other British homes. So these homes in this particular BedSed community are very sustainable. So in this next slide here, we'll be looking at the interdependence between London and the rural periphery. And the area in the rural periphery we'll be looking at is Stirling in Essex. And this here can actually be referred to as an accessible rural area. So accessible rural means that it's easy to get to for people that want to commute to London and back. You have the A12 here, actually. Stirling is right here in Essex, obviously, and that is the A12 all the way from Colchester here and into London. So that makes Stirling quite accessible. And then obviously the A12 goes into the M25, which means the London, M25 being the London orbital, means that you can access any part of London, whether it's north, east, south, or west, using that M25, first of all having traveled on the A12. And then in terms of trains into London, it's only 45 minutes by train into London from Hatfield Peveril Station, which is 5 minutes away. Now, this great connectivity has made Stirling one of the many dormitory towns and villages in the rural-urban fringe. So, a dormitory town rather is a town where people spend the night and then work in London or work in a different area, right? So it's a dormitory town because you just basically sleep there, but you spend most of your day elsewhere. Okay, so Turling actually depends on London for work and for services, while London rather depends on Turling for employees. So this is called interdependence, and is an example of counter-urbanization due to the cost of housing going up in London and the work from home culture having taken hold on London. And then as people, seek a better quality of life outside the hustle and bustle of the city of London. So benefits for accessible rural areas like Turling, what are they? So one of the benefits that Turling gets from this interdependence is increased tax revenue for the local council. And that tax revenue can then be reinvested back into the local economy. It means which will mean better services, it will mean job creation, and this will have a multiplier effect, which will be good for Turling. Then another benefit is that surrounding towns such as Chelmsford, which is nearby, also benefit from the money that is being spent by the commuters. Now, Turling depends on Chelmsford for goods and services, and this has led to an increase in Chelmsford population from 58,000 in 1971 to 181,500 in 2021. So the population in Chelmsford has tripled in the last 50 years. However, there are also some limitations or disadvantages. And one of those is that due to the increased demand for housing in places like Turling, the house prices there, have gone up. And that is obviously discouraging to people who have lived in Turling all their life, because they are now, priced out of the housing market. Okay, and then a second limitation or disadvantage is that the hustle and bustle of the city moves into Turling as those city workers move into Turling. And then there is pressure on the available land and destruction of habitat as more and more room is required for housing to be built. So in this slide, we are going to look at another example of how the UK's human landscape is changing. And that example is Devon. Now in 2003, the Met Office relocated their offices from outside London to Devon. What were the reasons for that move? One, Devon is a very beautiful place, like we know. And then the office rental in Devon is 10 times cheaper than London. So there's an incentive there because the Met Office obviously is saving a lot of money in terms of renting office space. Then Devon is quite accessible with Exeter Airport nearby, a motorway nearby, and 42 trains a day, coming into London. So this provides, great connectivity to London and other UK cities. So how has Devon changed then? So house prices in Devon have gone up, and this is due to demand. And a leading cause of this demand is retirement migration. Now, being a beautiful place and with the house prices being a little lower than London, a lot of people would, migrate to Devon, to live there for their retirement. And also, over 66% of Devon is designated as an area of outstanding natural beauty. So this means that there will be limited land available to build new houses. So that, shortage of land to build houses means that the demand for housing will be higher, and that will in turn increase the house prices. Then we have, another change that has taken place in Devon, and that is changing demographics. So due to the retirement migration that is taking place, then Devon now has an aging population, and then it also has a shrinking economically active population as younger people seek better opportunities elsewhere. So the younger people are moving out of Devon and seeking opportunity elsewhere. Then the last change that we're going to talk about here is pressure on the environment. Now, air pollution and pressure on ecologically fragile environments is taking place as the number of tourists that continue to visit Devon continue to increase every year. Now, in 2019, 30 million day visitors visited Devon, and that is a lot of people. And that obviously is creating a lot of pressure on those fragile environments and causing air pollution, congestion, and so on. In this next slide, we're going to look at why West Cornwall is one of the most deprived areas in the UK. So Cornwall is Devon's neighbor, but it has several challenges. Now you can see Cornwall right there, and Devon is right here. And Cornwall is a long county with no motorway. Now you can see that Cornwall spans right from this area here all the way with the border right there. It spans all the way from this area here going all the way to Penzance here. That's 140 kilometers with no motorway. That must mean that transportation here is extremely slow, and due to that you're likely not to have a lot of TNC investment because the accessibility is very, very poor. Then the other challenge that Cornwall has is that it has a small population, meaning that there is not a large enough pool of people or employees to attract those TNCs or big companies. Then the third challenge is that most people there, a lot of people there rather, have seasonal employment, which relies on tourism. Now, tourism obviously, is just basically low-paid seasonal work, and that is a problem because it's likely to propagate poverty in the area. Then, fourthly, we have poor education services. The local school provision is quite limited, with some of the students in sixth form having to travel over 30 miles just for that sixth form education. Now, that poses a problem because if people are not, getting educated to slightly higher levels, then you will have less expertise and specialized skills that are required to work in the knowledge economy. And obviously, the knowledge economy is what would give an opportunity to earn a higher income, which obviously is, a problem here in Cornwall. Then we have poor medical provision, and in Cornwall, only 38% of villages have a doctor's surgery, and most of those surgeries open only once a week. Now, the main hospital that is nearby is in Truro, which is 30 miles away. So obviously now if somebody, if there's a medical emergency, then having to travel 30 miles away, is quite a big problem. So why did the primary sector decline in Cornwall? Is the other question that we are going to be asking ourselves. So dairy farming in Cornwall has declined due to falling milk prices. Now, those milk prices are being driven down by supermarkets, and as a result, dairy farming, has really suffered the impact of that. Then fishing has also declined, and that is because overfishing by fishermen from Europe and from the UK as well has reduced the fish stocks. So the people who worked in fishing now can no longer necessarily earn a good income from the from the trade or from that particular sector. Then there was tin mining as well, and that tin mine, the last tin mine rather, in Cornwall closed in 1998 due to declining global prices. Then you had also China clay quarrying taking place in Cornwall, and that also has declined and has left the landscape quite scarred as well. So as we can see here, there are quite a number of problems that Cornwall is facing. So what strategies have been used to improve Cornwall? We are going to be discussing 3 strategies, and the first one is the Eden Project. So this is Cornwall's biggest attraction, with large plastic biomes that act as greenhouses to support a huge display of plants from rainforest and Mediterranean regions. So this project aims to be sustainable. First of all, it's actually built on an old quarry site. And that is a large aspect of sustainability, because they are using land that was previously scarred by the tin mining that we had talked about before. Now, this area in 20 years made 2 billion. This project made in 20 years 2 billion pounds, which is quite a bit of money. And as you can imagine, it created a lot of jobs. And has brought in over 17 million visitors who have spent over 1.6 billion pounds in the local Cornish economy. So the project has actually really benefited Cornwall. What are the criticisms though? So 97% of the visitors to this particular project arrive by car, and that causes a lot of congestion and air pollution, obviously. And then the visitor numbers have been declining because most of the people that visit don't come back for a second trip, and that is impacting on the income that was being generated initially. Then we also have farm shops. Now, these farm shops are a form of diversification. Now, with the decline, obviously, of the dairy industry that we had talked about previously, it means that those farmers needed to use, they needed to find other ways of making money. And so farm shops is one example of that, diversification, finding, strategies for a wider range of activities to generate an income. And the Lobbs farm is a good example of that. They sell products like beef, lamb, cheese, and wine, and this is mostly to the visitors that come to the Eden project. And this has actually increased the income of this particular farm from 30,000 to 700,000 every single year. Now that is quite a substantial increase in income. And this obviously has also created employment locally. And then the third strategy we'll be looking at is tourist accommodation. So this again is a form of diversification. And this is where the outbuildings that are no longer being used on the farms, for example, for animals, have been converted into holiday cottages, and the land is also used. The open land is also used as campsites, and that is now bringing income to the farmers from sources that are different from that initial primary activity, which was farming, or in this case dairy farming. But the criticism of this for this is that this tourist accommodation and campsites and so on reduces the biodiversity in the area, and especially for nesting birds. I hope that you have found this video useful. I will be posting the topic 6 video shortly, so make sure that you are subscribed so that you are notified when I post it. I'd also like to take this opportunity to wish you the best in your forthcoming exam. Let me know how you get on. Once again, all the best, and I look forward to seeing you soon. Bye-bye.